Percentages are one of the most dangerous problems in the GMAT. It is so common for people to make mistakes, either by adding a few zeros they shouldn't have added, or by forgetting some zeros, or by getting confused between the percentage share and the share. So what I strongly recommend is to double check all percentage calculations if you have the time. Now, how do we double check them? Well, there's two key words here. So one is to use an alternative calculation. So you want to avoid doing the same calculation a second time, because if you've made a mistake in the first time, then there's a good chance you'll make the same mistake again. And the other key word is approximate. So it's not about redoing the same detail of calculation, because otherwise you're essentially doubling the time it takes to do the question or that part of the question. So you want to take shortcuts, and the idea is that to be able to get a quick sense check of, okay, does this feel right? Is this roughly the order of magnitude or the rough size of what I'm expecting? So let's see an example. So let's say that we're calculating 15% of 200. Now, the answer here is 30. Okay, you can check with a calculator or doing some maths on your own if you want. But it's quite common for people to do that calculation and to get 3 or 300, for example. Now, how could we sense check that quickly? Well, one way of doing it, and there's always multiple ways of doing it, is to think, okay, well, 15% is a little bit less than 20%. And 20%, some of you may know, or may know by the time they take the GMAT, that 20% is 1/5 of something. And calculating 1/5 of 200 is quite easy. That is 40. So when we get 30, it's a bit lower than 40. That feels roughly right. If we get 300 in our initial calculation, 300 is much bigger than 40. There's something not quite right there. And it would be the same thing if we had found 3 in our first calculation, because 3 is much smaller than 40, and we would expect something to be a little bit smaller, but not too small. Let's see another example. So let's say that we're calculating 48% of 250. Now, the result of that is 120. I'm not going to go into the detail of like what's the best way of calculating that. That's for another section. But one way of sense checking that is to round up the 48% to 50%. And 50% is half of something. Half of 250 is 125. Do we get something that's close to 125? Yes, 120 is just below 125. That feels right. Now, let's go back to that example of taking a 15% of something. In this case, we're taking 15% of 200. Let's say that in our calculation, we get 3,000. Now, another way of sense checking that is to think, well, what is 100% of 200? 100% of something is just itself, so it's 200. And here we're getting something that's much bigger than 200. So that would correspond to a percentage that's much bigger than 100% and therefore much bigger than 15%. So again, something doesn't quite feel right here. And in particular, what's happened is that in the calculation, we've forgotten to divide by 100 that percent bit, so the division by 100, which a lot of people tend to forget when they do this calculation. Here we can easily spot it by just doing this quick sense check.